Hello friends! Today we are diving into one of the darkest and most mysterious chapters of human history, the world of the guillotine. This mechanism, born in an era of great change, was not just an instrument of execution. It was a symbol, a mystery, and a subject of endless debate that still fascinates and disturbs minds to this day. Why did something invented to be a humane method of punishment turn into a terrifying conveyor of death? And who truly stood behind the creation of this machine? The history of the guillotine is not only a series of bloody executions and twists of fate. It is a tangle of ideals, cruelty, and scientific ambition. You've probably heard that it was invented by Dr. Guillotine, a man who was supposedly an opponent of the death penalty and an advocate of humane reform. But what hides behind that legend? Why did his name become forever tied to the machine that would symbolize revolutionary terror? Did you know that the guillotine didn't appear out of nowhere? This machine inherited a long history of experiments with various methods of execution that existed in many countries long before the French Revolution. Why was it precisely then and there that the guillotine gained its dreadful fame? How did it influence the course of history? And why did it remain in use for nearly 2 centuries? We'll reveal fascinating facts. For example, how the guillotine was tested on animals and even human corpses, not only to ensure precision, but also for medical studies. How and why did a simple technical device become a symbol of swiftness and, according to the authorities of the time, a fairer form of punishment? And the most paradoxical thing, despite its brutality, the guillotine was perceived as a step forward, a tool of equality. No one stood above the law anymore, and executions ceased to depend on social class or privilege. But did this equality bring even a drop of justice? How did the guillotine change society, and what price was paid for this so-called progress? Did you know that the last execution by guillotine in France took place in 1977? So why did this machine, in an age of technological progress and new moral values, remain in use for so long? What social and political reasons explain its astonishing longevity? If you want to peer beyond the veil of fear and legend, to uncover the true face of the guillotine, with all its complexity, mystery, and contradictions, stay with us. This is not just a story about an old instrument of death. It's a journey into the very heart of the Dark Ages, an era when death itself became a matter of routine. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss this gripping investigation, full of unexpected discoveries, historical documents, and honest answers to questions that have haunted humanity for centuries. Ready to see the guillotine from a new angle? Then let's go. The guillotine did not immediately appear in the famous form we know today. Its roots go deep into the Middle Ages, when humanity was searching for ways to punish criminals while trying to keep pace with the harsh realities of the time. Different peoples invented their own methods of execution, often extremely cruel. In England, as early as the 13th century, there existed the so-called Halifax gibbet, a device with a heavy blade that dropped to behead the condemned. Although its shape and mechanics were different from the later guillotine, the principle was the same: a quick, lethal strike meant to spare the victim prolonged suffering. In Scotland, there was the maiden, a wooden coffin-like device lined with iron spikes, designed for slow, torturous punishment. These early contraptions, despite their savagery, laid the groundwork for what we now know as the guillotine. In essence, the guillotine was the logical next step in the evolution of executions, an attempt to make the terrible process as quick and, by the standards of the time, humane as possible. It was a technological revolution in punishment, initially viewed as progress, a way to eliminate the gruesome tortures that had long been accepted as normal. However, the story that Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine invented the device is only partially true. In reality, the physician became the symbol of penal reform, but he was neither an engineer nor the designer of the machine. His contribution lay in his advocacy for a quick, painless, and equal death, one that would replace the barbaric tortures of the past with a more civilized method. The actual design and engineering of the machine came from men like Tobias Schmidt, a German craftsman. Ironically, Dr. Guillotine later distanced himself from the machine entirely, horrified that his name had become associated with death. For him, it had been a humanitarian idea, one that evolved into something far darker.
The guillotine embodied the revolutionary principle of equality before the law. The blade fell just as swiftly on a common criminal as it did on a king. It was a radical transformation of justice, the belief that death itself should be impartial, without privilege or exception. But this idea had a terrifying flip side. Instead of a symbol of fairness, the guillotine became the tool of mass terror and political violence. During the French Revolution, the machine dominated the streets of Paris, claiming the lives of hundreds, then thousands. The Place de la Concorde became the epicenter of public executions, where people died not only for crimes, but for politics, ideology, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette met their fate under its blade, alongside countless citizens branded as traitors. The guillotine ceased to represent justice. It became the embodiment of fear. It worked like a grim factory, its blade rising and falling with industrial precision while crowds watched in horrified fascination. Here lay the great paradox. A device meant to minimize suffering became an instrument of endless death. It was during this period that the guillotine evolved from a mere mechanism into an eternal symbol of terror. There are countless legends claiming that victims could still feel after decapitation, that their eyes blinked or their mouths moved. These stories fueled fear and fascination for generations. But science offers a more rational view. Modern research shows that the brain ceases to function within seconds after blood flow stops, and consciousness fades almost instantly. So the myths of awareness after death are largely folklore, tales meant to amplify horror. Yet these myths endure, inspiring art, literature, and cinema, even today. For all its brutality, the guillotine remained a legitimate tool of justice for nearly 200 years. It was used right up until September 10, 1977, when Hamida Jandoubi, a convicted murderer, was executed in Marseille. Think about that. In an era of space exploration, early computers, and modern medicine, a medieval execution device was still in use. This contradiction speaks volumes about how difficult it is for societies to outgrow their past, and how deeply the symbols of power, fear, and justice are rooted in human culture. After the death penalty was abolished, the guillotine disappeared from the courtroom, but not from our imagination. It lives on as a dark emblem of both tyranny and justice, of progress and horror. Films, books, and games continue to invoke its image, reminding us of humanity's dual nature, our yearning for justice and our attraction to violence. Thus, the guillotine stands as a mirror of its age, a story of the struggle between fairness and cruelty, between innovation and morality. To follow its path is to understand not only the history of punishment, but the deeper social forces that shape civilization itself.